another form of changing the taxation, and I'm saying I don't think that is the whole answer. You can put up the price of people's motoring, but it won't be any good unless you offer them an alternative.
So you're not going to put up...
Can I explain? Labour councils in the northwest have come up with what has been a very good answer to this. They have built the first stage of the Manchester Metro, which runs partly from the Cheshire suburbs of Manchester. As a result of the Manchester Metro trams, the amount of traffic, commuter traffic from the Cheshire suburbs has been reduced by 20%. That's good for the environment. It gets people to work. They like travelling on that tram, and it's actually making a profit, and we need that sort of approach.
Frank Dobson, thank you very much indeed.
And John Prescott has arrived at 10 Downing Street. He waved to people on his way in. He said, "I've always wanted to do this." Now we go to Belfast. John Irvine is there. John, what is the reaction in Belfast, if you've been able to get it at all, to the twin victories for Sinn Féin?
Well, the results so far tell us that Northern Ireland remains a divided society. Elections here are about ethos and national tradition, those in favour of the United Kingdom and those in favour of a united Ireland. There are intriguing battles within the two camps, and the most interesting has been here in Belfast, where Gerry Adams has retaken the seat of West Belfast. He is once again the MP for that constituency.
Yes, but what the question, what I would be interested to know from this perspective is this going down well in Belfast, or is it a feeling of, oh my gosh?
Well, Republicans are absolutely delighted that they have retaken this seat. For the first time ever, they have two MPs. Martin McGuinness has taken the seat of Mid-Ulster. What it all means, I think, largely depends now upon the Labour administration. The peace talks are due to resume at Stormont on June the 3rd, and whether Sinn Féin are there or not depends upon whether or not there is a declared IRA ceasefire.
Do Sinn Féin believe that they will get, rightly or wrongly, do they believe that they will get a slightly easier time with Labour? Do they really believe that?
Frankly, they do, yes. They feel much more comfortable with a Labour administration that has a clear majority, as this one does. I think there was a feeling that the Unionists had a special in with the Tories because the Tories were relying upon Unionist votes within the Commons. Mo Mowlam and John Prescott have made remarks that Republicans find encouraging. Of course, the problem for the Labour administration is if they get Sinn Féin into the talks, will the Unionists stay there? The process has definitely been damaged by Sinn Féin's absence at Stormont, and it would be certainly damaged if the Unionists left as a price for Sinn Féin being brought in.
The issue clearly continues. John Irvine, thank you very much. We were saying earlier that the number of women in the House of Commons has doubled in this election from 1992 up to 118. A big impact on the House of Commons, which Alistair can help us with.
Certainly does. One intriguing crossover observation, which often crops up in these sorts of programmes, the very first woman ever elected to the House of Commons was actually a Sinn Féin candidate, and she decided not to take up her seat, as I suspect our two gentlemen from Northern Ireland would also do the same. And the first woman, of course, to be elected and take up her seat was Nancy Astor, and that was back in 1919. So, nearly 80 years on, let's bring in the House of Commons here for you again and fill it up with the members of Parliament and give you some idea. There they are, come along, they're all a bit tired like the rest of us, I suppose, and colour them in again, Labour on the government side and the Tories there on the opposition benches. And of the 119 women who are members of this new House of Commons, 102 of them are sitting there on the Labour benches, 13 of them are Conservatives, 2 of them are Lib Dems, and there amongst the others, which as Alex Salmon pointed out to us quite correctly earlier on, includes the Scottish National Party, 2 of them are SNP. So 119 women, quite an improvement since 1919, Jonathan?
Quite an improvement. Women say always that it will really transform the character of the House of Commons, that it'll make people behave differently in the House of Commons, that the hours will change, that women will simply not tolerate staying in there until 10 o'clock at night because they want to get home to their families and so on. Of course, some of the women who've been in the House of Commons in the past, Margaret Thatcher comes passingly to mind, have been the kind of women who haven't seemed to be very concerned about that aspect. But people do think that it might make a real difference, that creches would be there, that the kind of facilities that women want, that men would start to behave slightly differently, that the boys' club atmosphere of the House of Commons would shift. And it does certainly have that atmosphere, and there will be a lot of people, not only women, but also a lot of men who will think, well, maybe the women will civilise the House of Commons and haul it into the 21st century. That, of course, remains to be seen. In a moment, we can talk to Janet Anderson. Janet Anderson, who's waiting, in fact, to be cross-questioned by Sue Lawley and her panel. Sue.
Janet Anderson, good afternoon. I must just ask you straight away that you said not so very long ago, and it'll come back to haunt you forevermore, but we still don't understand what you meant by it, women under Labour will become more promiscuous. Did you mean ubiquitous?
I have to say, Sue, that was a rather light-hearted comment taken entirely out of context by a rather mischievous journalist.
So no promiscuity,
no.
Even though there are all these women now in Parliament. Let me ask for a question for you from Catherine O'Rourke. Would you like to put a question?
Will you be in the new cabinet?
Well, Catherine, I think what you're asking me is what will the new Labour government under Tony Blair do to improve the lives of women? And already we have a number of policies which will do a great deal.
No, she wants to know if you will have a cabinet post.
Well, what we have said is that there will be someone in the cabinet who will have responsibility for women.
But not
now,
you.
who that is entirely up to the new Prime Minister to decide.
But if it were you, it would be the swiftest promotion on record, wouldn't
Yes,
you, when you came
it
into the
most
House
certainly
in
would.
92?
And as I say, that's for the Prime Minister to decide. But let's just talk about the increased number of women MPs in the Commons, because that's very important indeed. And what it will ensure is that there will be women there at every stage of the legislative process, making sure that consideration is given to the impact of government policies on women and families.
Right. Let me bring in Andrew Dacanay. Your question.
Good afternoon, Janet Anderson.
Good afternoon.
In the name of sexual equality nowadays, some would claim we should also have a minister for men. And in the name of positive discrimination, how far do you wish to fractionate the electorate? I mean, should we have a minister for ethnic minorities, for example?
No, what we're seeking to do is to make sure that women's concerns are taken into account by government. And as I say, there is a need to recognise that what governments can or cannot do impact on men and women differently. If I can give you an example, in the recent debate on the family law bill, the previous government's bill to reform the divorce law, a group of women in the Lords moved an amendment to ensure that in future divorced women would be able to benefit from their former husband's pensions. And we made sure that that was put through in the Commons. Now, I may be wrong, but I'm not sure that that would have happened if there hadn't been any women in Parliament.
But what does it mean when Labour says, when it's promised to, quote, establish more women in senior positions and persuade employers not to discriminate? How do you do that?
Well, it's very difficult, Sue. It's a question of changing attitudes and cultures. And I have fairly strong views about one way in which we can do that. I think there is one issue, and it's something about which I receive more correspondence than anything else, and that's to do with violence against women, sexual abuse of women, and indeed rape. And I think this goes to the very heart of discrimination against women. And if we can actually change attitudes and cultures on that, then we will have gone a large way to remove discrimination against women. And can I just say to the previous questioner that I hope we will eventually have achieved equality, so we will no longer need a special person to speak out on behalf of women.
Accept that point?
Yes, it's all very commendable. I'm just wondering if a man could ever be the minister for women.
I don't see why not.
Okay, another quick question from Philip Gould. Mr. Gould.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Anderson.
Good afternoon.
What issues, other than the obvious ones like childcare, will the creation of your post promote in the new Labour government?
Well, I think, for example, our commitment to introduce a minimum wage is very important for women. We estimate that 7 out of 10 people who will benefit from that will be women. I can tell you, I'll give you an example from my own constituency, which is the worst case I ever came across, and that was of 2 women who were paid £27 for a 42.5-hour week. And that is simply intolerable.
What
and
do you
so,
think the minimum wage should be then?
Well, that's something we'll have to decide, and that's something, Sue, on which there should be the broadest possible consensus, because it should be a minimum wage that works.
But do you have a figure in mind?
I don't have a figure in mind. That's something on which we have to reach the most widespread possible agreement.
Janet Anderson, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.
Thank you.
In a moment, a Scottish Parliament, and we hope the first pictures of Cherie Blair and her family in number 10 Downing Street. But for a moment, quick break.
You Okay, you're gonna love this guy. Runs like clockwork. Time?
0620.
He's finishing breakfast, and right now he's heading for the shower.
0621, he's in the shower. 20 Celsius, 53 seconds. 0622, he brushes his teeth. 20 strokes.
Is it the crispy golden flakiness, the lightly sweetened honeyness, or the flaky hint of nuttiness that makes Kellogg's Crunchy Nut cornflakes so irresistible?
0625, he's at the door. You can set your watch by him.
Kellogg's Crunchy Nut cornflakes. The trouble is, they taste too good.
The new Electrolux Power System Cyclone clears everything in its path, and the Power System's dust bag can filter and trap the tiniest particles. Only the Electrolux Power System gives you the best of both worlds.
The fajita is in your hands. Vote o del paso. Join the party.
Prepare to be electrified. Hitachi Dolby Pro Logic televisions with 3DS recreate the effect of cinema surround sound using just 4 internal speakers. No wires or external speakers. Wall-to-wall sound, not speakers. Hitachi 3DS. Clearly Hitachi.
So, the wedding's off.
Yes.
I won't ask. Come and meet the rest of my guests. None of them are off to foreign parts.
We're off.
Where?
Got a lift. Wonderful. Isn't this wonderful?
I could get used to it.
Oh, now it's a dinner party.
Nescafe Gold Blend. Rich, smooth, with a distinctive new shape.
You'll be home in 3 days. This is our last gold blend together. Here's to the wedding.
Did you have fun at Disneyland Paris?
Oh, we're too old for all that.
1997, the year to be here. It's our 5th anniversary and every day is party day. Someone you know can't wait to go. Disneyland Paris. Call for your free brochure on 0990 030303.
Welcome back. There are 5 more seats to declare. There's one of them being recounted in this 1997 election. None of them, though, are in Scotland, and Alistair can give us the picture in Scotland. Alistair.
Jonathan, thanks. Just to remind you that there are 72 seats up in Scotland. At the beginning of the day, Labour reckoned they had 2 targets, the Liberal Democrats 1 and the SNP 3. It turned out to be a very different story. So first of all, let's show you how you voted up in Scotland. 46% for the Labour Party, 22% for the SNP, 18% for the Conservative Party, and 13% for the Liberal Democrat. Compared to 1992, Labour were up by 6.7%. The SNP, and bear this in mind in a moment's time, just up by 0.5%. The Tories down by a touch over 8%, and the Lib Dems almost static. But how did that translate into the tally of seats? How did the parties actually do? Well, the Labour Party took 56 seats, the Liberal Democrats took 10, the SNP took 3, and the Conservative Party a big, fat 0. And in terms of gains and losses, look at that. Not 2 target seats for Labour, they got 6. The Lib Dems had 1 target, they got 2. The SNP had 3 target seats, they got all 3. The Conservative Party started with 11 and lost all 11. No Tories in Scotland. Jonathan.
Thank you very much, and now we can go up to Scotland, where David Rose is in the Edinburgh Assembly, would-be Edinburgh Assembly. David.
This handsome building will house the first parliament to sit in Scotland for 300 years. It's called, appropriately enough, New Parliament House. And it will be a real parliament, not a mere assembly, because this place will have the powers to make real changes. It'll be able to change laws in every area of Scottish domestic life, like housing and the health service. But it won't deal with defence and foreign affairs. They'll stay at Westminster. If the referendum agrees, it'll be able to put up taxes by 3p. Critics say it'll provide another level of expensive bureaucracy, but supporters say it'll provide some badly needed democratic control. Come inside and see what's happening. This Scottish Parliament will be very different from the Westminster one. For a start, many of the 129 MSPs, that's members of the Scottish Parliament, will be elected by proportional representation. There'll be many more women. It'll sit here during the day rather than at night. Its supporters say it'll be a modern legislature, with a clear implication that Westminster is an antiquated one. This is the timetable. The new government will set up a referendum to take place in the autumn. Assuming that gives the go-ahead, a major constitutional bill will have to get through both houses at Westminster next year. Elections in 1999, and the aim is that this place should be up and running, a working parliament, in the year 2000.
David, it's a tremendous looking place. It's one of the ironies, isn't it, that as a result of this election, the Tories, who had fought tooth and nail against devolution, are not going to, if their local support, as it were, in Scotland is anything like their general election support, they're not going to be represented very heavily in any case there.
Well, I think an even greater irony is that the Tories, who've stuck out against proportional representation, their best chance of getting in here is probably on the list system, which will elect 50-odd MPs, MSPs to sit here. But the Tories are in a terrible and humiliating situation at the moment, without an MP in Scotland, without an MEP in Scotland, and with the control of no councils in Scotland. Their ability to mount opposition in Westminster on Scottish matters is very difficult indeed.
Where Labour now is more powerful than ever in Scotland.
Labour's more powerful than ever in Scotland, without a doubt, and a great number of key cabinet members come from Scotland and represent Scottish constituencies. And I think that's going to be very interesting indeed when Mr. Blair is being a national British Prime Minister. The tensions there, and Gordon Brown as Chancellor of the Exchequer, trying to balance the books, and George Roberts and O'Donnell Dewar fighting for Scotland, fighting for money for this Parliament to spend. There's going to be some interesting tensions there, but of course Mr. Brown and Mr. Blair can't see this place fail, though many Scots, including many Scottish Labour voters, are not quite convinced of Mr. Blair's total enthusiasm for this Parliament.
Which he, I think, likened briefly not so long ago, perhaps inadvertently, to an English parish council. David Rose, thank you very much.
He claims he was partially misquoted, of course.
Yes, of course, and he probably was. You never know. Anyway, the time's come for an overall view from us where we think we are at the end of this long, long day. Mike, what's your thoughts?
Well, my images are of all those seats tumbling during the course of the evening. Never has the British public spoken so decisively, as given us its political mind. I shall remember particularly the dignified exit made by Mr. Major, both at night and most particularly in Downing Street, as he announced that he would step down, that there would be a leadership contest. I shall remember that morning shot of the new dawn literally happening with the lightning blue sky behind Tony Blair. But if I had my desert island disc of today, it would have to be those amazing scenes as Tony Blair walked up the length and breadth of Downing Street with Cherie, with the children, glad handing on both sides. So many people so very hopeful, for whatever reason, of this new government and what it's going to do for them, and it written on their faces as Tony Blair went in to take up his premiership.
And Alistair, your most powerful thought, the battleground going on forever and ever, or what?
No, I have to say to you, I think it was personality again, because we've always put up names of constituencies, and even as the night wore on, had to remind ourselves of some of these new names like Hales Owen and Rowley Regis, which would never come up before. But for me, it was seeing people like Michael Portillo, Malcolm Rifkind, these big names, these big players from 18 years of Tory government, falling like so many paper men. And as I said to you earlier on in the conversation, Stephen Twigg, the young Labour successful candidate in Enfield Southgate, telling me at a party just a few weeks ago, I'm only out for a blooding, it'll be next time I'll win. He won for Labour.
And in all your preparations, the polls, what it might be, you never thought that that would happen. You never thought that Michael Portillo could leave Enfield Southgate.
No, I'm not sure whether the law allows us to divulge these matters, but I am somebody who likes to have a little flutter occasionally, and all I will say is that I lost a certain amount of money by predicting that Mr. Blair would win, but by no way at this length or measure.
I think an awful lot of people must be in the same state. Colin Rallings.
Well, that's right. I mean, Alistair's absolutely correct. Nobody thought it would really turn out like this, but it did, and of course for us behind here, it's been the records that have been so interesting. Labour's largest majority ever, the Tories' worst performance since 1832. But Labour has done well everywhere, and most importantly in all types of seats. And nowhere is that clearer than in the southeast and in London. 10 seats in London saw swings to Labour in excess of 17%. We couldn't have imagined that when Labour had its own worst contemporary election result just 14 years ago, rather, in 1983. The wheel has turned full circle, and of course the Conservatives will hope that it turns once again in the succeeding decade.
Because the other side of that, of course, still with you, Colin, is the fact that the Tories are out in so many places in 2 countries. But we're just going down to Downing Street, where Gordon Brown is there, who is going to be Chancellor. Going down, I suspect, like all the members of the inner cabinet, if I can call them that, are all on their way now. We know that John Prescott has been there. Here's Gordon Brown, giving a short, brief smile before he goes into number 10, doubtless to quietly celebrate with Mr. Blair and to be told formally that he's going to be Chancellor of the Exchequer, though there's no doubt about that. Colin, back to that, the Tories, I was saying, not in Scotland, not in Wales and so forth.
Not in Scotland, not in Wales, not in Birmingham, not in Sheffield, not in Leeds, not in Portsmouth, not in Plymouth, not in Derby. We could go on and on. They've become an English suburban and rural party. But as I say, they will know it's happened before and will hope it happen again. The political wheel, the political pendulum will swing again.
David Butler, you've seen election after election, most of them in television studios. How does this one rate?
Well, you know, we used to divide up history by the dates of kings and queens. I think we now do divide it up by the dates of elections. 1964, Wilson coming, 1979, Margaret Thatcher coming, and now 1997 with Tony Blair. I think it will be a memorable point in history. It'll make us think afresh about all sorts of things. I don't know whether this government will be a success or a failure, but it at least has got itself a more impressive mandate than any government that has happened in my adult lifetime. So I look forward to the future with great curiosity.
David Cowling.
We opened this century with an election in 1906 when the Conservative Party was virtually destroyed, then by the Liberal Party. We end this century with an election where the Conservative Party has been virtually destroyed, but by the Labour Party. My colleagues have spoken of some of the sort of superlatives which you've become accustomed to. Looking to the future, it seems to me inconceivable that the Conservatives can recover the sort of 179 majority we're predicting now in one go. So that seems to me to suggest that Mr. Blair's in there for 2 terms in any event. But it's a new House. Over 1/3 of its members are new, 1/6 of its members are women, and it has the highest ethnic representation. We haven't got only a change of government, maybe a change of style, we've got a very different House of Commons, which I think is going to be of some interest to us in subsequent weeks and months and years.
David, thank you. Now, we've been blessed in this election programme to have with us Sue Lawley and the team, her panel from the ITV 500 programmes, who brought, therefore, their own views and beliefs and attitudes into the professional studio with great aplomb and pleasure. What are your thoughts, Sue, and the thoughts of your colleagues there?
Well, they've had, I know, such a ringside seat at this piece of history in the making. It's left an indelible impression on them. They've all been telling me that. But let me collect some final impressions. Sian, what's your feeling as you've watched all this happen?
Never before have I woken up the day after an election and feel full of such hope for the future, hope for me, hope for my husband, and hope for my newborn baby son.
What about you, Madeleine Mott? A black shirt you've got on. Are you?
It's a double blow because of John Major stepping down as well. Let's hope Tony Blair, credit to him, he's won, that he does what he says he's going to do.
He was enormously dignified in defeat, though, Mr. Major, it has to be said.
Yes. Yes, but let's hope that the under 44s do get a state pension and it's in black and white. That's one thing.
Right. And what about you, Ian Bruce? Your impression as we go?
Well, from what I've seen, Sue, it seems to me that the Martin Bell result says it all, and the British electorate simply have reached the stage where, regardless of what they said, you'll have to go.
And you, sir?
I think what we've got here is a very British
people's revolution and nothing short of that, and that now the challenge is not to leave the outcome to the new Labour government, but rather the challenge of all of those people's aspirations that wanted a change in our society for the better, to gather together and work to make a better life for all in our society, our communities, and a better life for all in the world, including and above all the great environmental challenge that faces us all. We'll only do that if everybody joins in, citizens and government, working in partnership for this great challenge for change.
Thank you. You didn't know we had Tony Blair's speechwriter down here, did you, Jonathan?
I certainly didn't, but I knew that we had some pretty powerful thoughts, and there they were being expressed. Thanks very much to all our panel, of course. Mike, just one last thought.
My last thought is that if we were in Downing Street now, we would find it very, very, very hushed. All the shouting, all the flag waving has gone, and the Prime Minister has gone into Downing Street, and now the hard and very lonely business, frankly, of sorting out all the business that has to be put together in time for the Queen's speech, and now the hard, lonely work begins of making the decisions, and all as we come back to the manifesto pledges, cutting class sizes, dealing with young offenders, tackling the NHS, getting the young under 25-year-olds back to work, and cutting VAT on heating. That now is the programme. That is now where the work has begun.
Mike Brunson, thanks very much. This has been a momentous day in British history, and whether you are glad or sad at the result, there's no doubt that our country is entering a new political era. You can't top that. At 10 o'clock last night, we came on the air and we said that we had an exit poll. And I have to tell you that privately we all thought, is it a bit high? It was 159, and exit polls have been known to be wrong, I remember saying. The actual result is a majority of 179, an extraordinary result. It leaves the Liberal Democrats in a position that they haven't experienced for 60 years. It leaves John Major no longer Prime Minister, no longer leader of his party very soon, and a great battle for the succession there. But most of all, it leaves Tony Blair in Downing Street with the support of the country through the ballot box, which no one, I think, could have imagined. An extraordinary occasion, which we've all massively, in the ITV Election 900, enjoyed bringing to you. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. Good afternoon.